The sun was barely up when Jordan Miller pulled into the cracked parking lot of Rusty Joe's Auto Repair. The little garage on the corner of Willow Street had been his sanctuary for years, an escape from the shadows of his past and the echo of voices that used to call him brother. Covered in oil stains and sweat before noon most days, Jordan had built a modest life of routine and resilience. Jordan wasn't flashy, didn't do small talk, and didn't attend any high school reunions. The few customers who came by knew him as the quiet mechanic who fixed your car better than anyone else in town. What they didn't know was that Jordan had once been part of something very different, something golden, beautiful, and broken. Back in high school, Jordan was the glue of a tight-knit friend group that called themselves the Core Five: Jordan, Ethan, Caleb, Nate, and Tyler. They were inseparable, always dreaming big in their small Kentucky town. Plans of moving to LA, starting businesses, and taking over the world weren't just idle chatter. They had drive. Or at least Jordan thought they all did. But things shifted the year after graduation. Tyler got into college on a sports scholarship and never looked back. Nate started working with his dad's construction firm. Caleb tried his hand at music and left town, while Ethan, the smooth talker, started dabbling in real estate. Some of it legal, most of it shady. Jordan, however, stayed put. He tried calling. He tried visiting. But one by one, they ghosted him. The final blow came when they launched a business, Core Technologies, a startup in Chicago that gained traction fast. It was a project the five of them had once dreamed up together at 2 a.m. in Jordan's garage. But when it finally took off, his name wasn't on anything. Not the paperwork. Not the credits. Not even a thank you call. The betrayal was quiet. It came not with screaming matches or dramatic fallouts, but through the silence. Jordan found out about the launch through a LinkedIn post. It was like watching your dream wedding on someone else's Instagram. He was gutted. So, Jordan turned inward. He opened his garage with what little money he had saved and poured himself into rebuilding engines and rebuilding trust with himself. His dog, Buddy, a golden retriever with a limp and eyes full of loyalty, was his only constant now. Together, they shared quiet dinners and long walks. Jordan didn't date, didn't party, and certainly didn't forget. One foggy Thursday morning, something unusual happened. A black SUV pulled up outside the garage just as Jordan was flipping the sign to open. A man in a gray suit stepped out, holding a tablet and looking distinctly out of place in a setting that smelled like grease and gasoline. "Are you Jordan Miller?" the man asked, adjusting his expensive-looking glasses. "Depends who's asking," Jordan said, wiping his hands on a rag. The man smiled politely, extending the tablet. "This is a non-disclosure agreement. Someone would like to speak with you. Privately." Jordan raised an eyebrow but didn't reach for the tablet. "Who sent you?" The man hesitated, then answered. "An old friend. From the Core." Jordan froze. The sound of that name, the Core, felt like a gut punch. For a second, he couldn't move. Then slowly he took the tablet and scanned the screen. "Where?" he asked finally, his voice low and unreadable. "There's a private jet waiting at Lexington Bluegrass Airport. You're needed in Chicago. It's urgent." Jordan looked away. The thought of setting foot in the city that erased him brought a bitter taste to his mouth. He glanced at Buddy, who sat quietly beside the garage door, sensing his owner's unease. "What makes them think I'd ever lift a finger to help?" Jordan said, more to himself than the messenger. The man cleared his throat. "Because their entire company is on the verge of collapse. And you're the only one who can save it." A deep, uneasy silence followed. The wind picked up, scattering old leaves across the lot. Jordan handed the tablet back. "I'll think about it." As the SUV pulled away, Jordan sat down on an old milk crate near the entrance. The quiet hum of his past had just become a roar. Something was coming. Something big. And like it or not, it had his name written all over it. That night, he pulled out a dusty notebook from a drawer, one that still had early blueprints and sketches from Core Technologies, drawn by all five of them during those late-night hangouts. His name was on every page, just never on the product. As he flipped through the pages, he felt something stir, not anger, but purpose. His hands, calloused and stained, still remembered every circuit, every concept, every wire they ever talked about. He closed the notebook. "You need me now," he whispered into the quiet of the garage. "Let's see how that feels." By the time Jordan reached Lexington Bluegrass Airport, the morning sun had melted away the mist, but not the tension hanging over him. His mechanic's hands looked out of place against the sleek leather seats of the private jet waiting on the tarmac. He sat alone. No welcome party, no old friends, just an empty glass of water and a folder stamped with the Core Technologies logo. Inside the folder were two things: a confidentiality agreement and a handwritten note in familiar, sharp script. "If you're reading this, then we're desperate. You know what we built. We can't fix it without you. Please, just come.
Ethan."
Jordan almost crumpled it, but curiosity pressed down harder than pride. The engines roared, and within an hour and a half, he was flying toward the very people who once left him behind like scrap metal. In Chicago, a black car was waiting. The driver didn't speak, just nodded and drove Jordan through a city that felt too polished, too clean, too cold. Glass towers lined the streets, and among them stood the centerpiece, Core Technologies HQ, an 18-story building with tinted windows and an ego bigger than the skyline. As the elevator climbed, Jordan's heart pounded with a rhythm of past and present. Betrayal has a long memory, and his was photographic. The doors opened onto a floor that screamed money, high-end furniture, tech displays, and a massive touchscreen wall that flashed images of product mock-ups. Waiting for him in a minimalist glass-walled boardroom were three of the four men who had once been his brothers. Ethan Cole looked older, but still had that same sly smirk. He wore a tailored navy suit and a Rolex. Beside him sat Caleb Jennings, now balding with a nervous twitch in his left eye, tapping a pen against the table. And there was Nate Roberts, still bulky from high school football, now wearing stress like a second skin. "Jordan," Ethan started, standing to shake his hand. Jordan didn't move. "Where's Tyler?" Nate spoke up. "He's in LA. Still running his sports agency. He's not part of this anymore." "So now I'm convenient?" Jordan said coldly, not sitting. "Last I checked, you all pretended I didn't exist." Caleb leaned forward. "We made mistakes. Big ones. But right now, Core is collapsing, and the prototype you designed, the one you pitched back in high school, is the only thing that can save us." Jordan's jaw tightened. "You mean the prototype you all stole and launched without me?" Silence. Ethan cleared his throat. "It wasn't like that. Things moved fast. Investors came in, timelines got crazy. We thought you wouldn't want in." "You thought," Jordan repeated. "But none of you asked." Caleb slid a file toward him. "We need you to help us finish the next phase of Eidolon." Jordan's eyes narrowed. "You kept the name?" Eidolon had been his idea. An AI interface that combined physical mechanics with intuitive learning systems. A revolutionary design for mobility devices that could reconfigure themselves for individual users, especially for people with disabilities. It wasn't just tech, it was personal. Jordan's late sister, Rachel, who had been in a wheelchair since birth, had been the inspiration behind the idea. He picked up the file. Inside were schematics, but they were broken, scattered, clearly rushed and wrong. "You butchered it," he said. "This is a Frankenstein of the original design." "We didn't have your notes," Nate admitted. "And now the AI is causing system failures, limbs locking, feedback loops. A few lawsuits have already started. We're bleeding out, Jordan." Jordan laughed bitterly. "Good." Ethan leaned in, eyes pleading now. "You have every right to hate us. But think about what Eidolon could do. Your sister would have changed the world with this tech. Don't let our failure bury your dream." That hit like a hammer. For years, Jordan had told himself he was done, that what they did could never be forgiven. But somewhere deep inside him, he'd always known Eidolon wasn't just a project. It was a piece of Rachel. It was his. And now it was broken. He paced the room. "So let me get this straight," Jordan said. "You want me to fix the tech you stole, save your company, and pretend like nothing happened?" "No," Ethan replied. "We want you to come back. As a partner. And lead Eidolon's rebuild. with your name on it, publicly. The board has already agreed. 51% ownership of the project. You'd have full control. Jordan paused. What's the catch? Nate looked at him grimly. If this rollout fails, core's finished. We'll lose everything. And so will you. Jordan smirked. You already took everything from me. There's nothing left to lose. Before they could respond, a soft knock came on the boardroom door. A woman stepped in, mid-30s, confident, smart eyes. She looked at Jordan. You must be Mr. Miller. I'm Dr. Elise Grant, head of AI development. I've read your original blueprints. They're genius. But I have to warn you, if you're coming on board, you're walking into a tech crisis that's already on fire. Jordan didn't flinch. Then, let's get to work. Jordan hadn't even unpacked his duffel bag before he was pulled into a war room filled with holographic projections, stacks of code sheets, and prototypes lined like wounded soldiers. The air was thick with urgency. It wasn't just a company on the line. It was reputations, futures, and in Jordan's case, justice. Dr. Elise Grant stood beside him, flipping through system logs. This version of Eidolon is barely functional. They tried patching over the core neural sync algorithm without even understanding its structure. That algorithm was my baby, Jordan muttered, scrolling through lines of corrupted AI code. They tore it apart like it was a TikTok recipe. Elise gave him a sideways glance. You're not here just to fix code, are you? Jordan's eyes met hers. I'm here to take back what was mine. They worked late into the night. Jordan sketched corrections on whiteboards, dictated new training protocols for the AI interface, and rebuilt the neural mesh from scratch. He was in his element, but something had changed. Years of anger had made him sharper, colder. Trust wasn't given, it had to be earned. By the third day, the team started noticing the shift. Engineers who once whispered behind his back were now listening closely, taking notes. Even Caleb, awkward and humbled, showed up with 2 coffees and no sarcastic remarks. Ethan, however, kept his distance. He'd check in, ask questions, but never linger. Guilt wrapped him like a scarf he couldn't take off. Jordan didn't care. At least, that's what he told himself. On Friday, the test lab prepped for a full-range simulation. A young intern named Miles, barely out of college, volunteered to operate Eidolon's exoframe. You sure? Jordan asked. Miles nodded, nervous but excited. If your redesign works, I'll be able to climb stairs for the first time in years. Jordan blinked. Wait, you're? Miles smiled and lifted his pant leg, revealing a high-grade prosthetic. Veteran. I lost my leg in Afghanistan. The room went silent. Jordan nodded solemnly. Let's get you moving. The test began. Eidolon's frame, sleek, titanium, and newly synced, wrapped around Miles like a second skin. Jordan keyed in the neural sync. All right, Miles. Take your first step. The frame moved, slow but steady. Left foot, then right. Jordan held his breath. The motion was smooth, responsive. Miles took 5 more steps, then 10. Then walked unaided across the platform. Cheers erupted. Elise wiped a tear. Caleb actually hugged Jordan before pulling away awkwardly. But Jordan wasn't smiling. He was scanning every sensor, every data stream. His mind was already on the next build. Later that evening, he found himself alone in the observation deck, overlooking Chicago's glowing cityscape. Elise joined him, 2 beers in hand. You did it, she said, handing him one. You brought Eidolon to life. Jordan nodded. Almost. You know, she added, for someone who says he doesn't care anymore, you sure work like someone who still does. He chuckled softly. I care about the project. About Rachel. The rest? Not so much. You think you can rebuild Eidolon without rebuilding yourself? She asked gently. Jordan didn't answer. The following week brought setbacks. A firmware update clashed with the new neural sync. Jordan spent 36 hours straight in the lab, running simulations and rewriting code. Meanwhile, the board started poking around. A woman named Veronica Briggs, cold as glass, cornered Jordan during a meeting. We appreciate your contribution, Mr. Miller, but you need to wrap development in 3 weeks. Investors are threatening to pull out. Jordan narrowed his eyes. If you rush this again, someone's going to get hurt. Noted, she said without blinking. But so will our stockholders if you don't deliver. Jordan stormed out, fuming. Outside the boardroom, Ethan caught up with him. She's a shark, Ethan said. Always has been. You brought her in, Jordan snapped. You brought all this in. Ethan looked tired. You think I don't regret what we did? You think I sleep at night knowing we left you behind? Jordan turned away. Spare me the guilt trip. But that night, back in his temporary apartment, Jordan found himself staring at an old picture on his phone. Him, Ethan, Caleb, Nate, and Rachel. Back when life was simple and loyalty wasn't a currency. The next day, Nate dropped by the lab unannounced. I wanted to say, I'm sorry, Nate said, rubbing the back of his neck. I didn't fight for you. I let them push you out because I was scared. You were always smarter than the rest of us, and that scared the hell out of me. Jordan looked up from the schematic. You think an apology fixes 10 years? No, Nate said. But it's a start. Against all odds, Jordan nodded. Idolin's final test loomed. The next version would be presented to the board, the press, and the public in a high-profile demo. But behind the scenes, sabotage whispers began. Someone on the team, one of the old partners, was leaking internal builds. Jordan confronted Ethan. Who else has access to the master drive? Ethan hesitated. Only us. Me, Caleb,
Nate.
maybe Elise. Jordan stiffened. Elise?
No.
She's been here from the start. Don't trust too fast, Jordan, Ethan warned. People are complicated. The cracks were forming again. Just as he was rebuilding something meaningful, betrayal loomed once more. That night, Jordan placed a tracker on the core files and rerouted all access logs through his private terminal. He wasn't going to be blindsided again. Not this time. The day of the final demo arrived. The energy at Echelon HQ crackled with tension. The boardroom was transformed into a sleek, high-tech amphitheater filled with investors, tech journalists, influencers, and military reps. Everyone was here to witness the new and improved Eidolon, the very project that had been stolen from Jordan, now reborn under his leadership. Jordan stood backstage, adjusting the AI interface on his tablet, while Miles stood suited in the latest exo frame. The crowd on the other side of the wall buzzed with anticipation. Cameras were already rolling. Live streams were up. But Jordan's mind wasn't just on the presentation. His screen lit up with an alert. Unauthorized data transfer attempt. Origin. Unit number 27. Access. Level 4. Timestamp. 4:12 a.m. Jordan's jaw clenched. Whoever had tried to copy the neural mesh code had done it hours before the demo, probably thinking he wouldn't catch it. But he had rerouted the firewall, embedded honeypots into the master file system, and the IP trace had returned one name.
Caleb.
Jordan didn't have time to confront him yet. He filed the evidence into an encrypted folder and turned his focus back to the task at hand. Eidolon was seconds from changing the world, again.
He walked out into the spotlight.
A spotlight that had once belonged to Ethan. Cameras flashed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. He stood beside the podium, cleared his throat, and began. 10 years ago, I walked away from this company.
Not by choice.
I was erased. Pushed out by people I trusted, friends I called brothers. They stole the blueprints, they rewrote history, and they buried the truth. The room was silent. But here's the thing about truth, it has a pulse. And eventually, it finds its way back to the surface. A wave of unease swept across the crowd. Ethan and Caleb sat front row. Caleb looked pale. Ethan just stared, unmoving. Jordan tapped the tablet. The stage floor split open. From below, Eidolon rose. Not just a machine, but a promise made real. Ladies and gentlemen, Jordan said, meet Eidolon X, neural adaptive, fully modular, and synced with a learning AI built to evolve alongside its operator. This isn't a product. It's a second chance for every veteran, every worker, every person told they were limited by their body. This is the future. Miles, inside the suit, moved with stunning agility. He climbed steps, ran in place, performed delicate movements with a brush on canvas. The crowd erupted. Jordan watched, proud but guarded. He looked toward Elise. She gave him a subtle nod. So far, everything was smooth. But then, just as Miles turned to bow, Eidolon froze. The screen on Jordan's tablet flickered. External control request accepted. No, Jordan whispered. His fingers flew across the tablet. Someone's hijacking the AI. On stage, Eidolon locked up. Miles stumbled, frightened. The lights flickered. Panic stirred in the crowd. Security began moving. Jordan grabbed a mic system error. Please stay calm. Behind the scenes, code raced. Someone had injected a backdoor, a ghost protocol buried in the neural core. Jordan dug deep into the lines and froze when he saw the author tag. User, C_Dresden.
Caleb.
Jordan looked up at the crowd and made a choice. No more secrets. He turned to the projector and cast the code onto the giant screen behind him. This is sabotage. Someone on our own team planted a malicious override meant to trigger at this very moment. This is Caleb Dresden's signature. Gasps erupted. Caleb jumped from his seat. That's a lie. Caleb shouted. You can't prove that. I can, Jordan interrupted, voice calm but loud. I placed a trace on the neural net after noticing inconsistencies. Your terminal accessed the root drive at 4:12 a.m. I've logged it all.
He tapped the tablet.
On screen, timestamps, access logs, and the confirmed source IP, Caleb's work terminal. Ethan stood up slowly. Caleb, is this true? Caleb was speechless, sweat breaking across his forehead. You were going to sell Eidolon to a private military firm in Nevada, Jordan continued. That's what this was about. You didn't believe in the mission. You believed in a paycheck. The board members were already speaking into earpieces. Veronica Briggs stood. Security, escort Mr. Dresden off the premises. Caleb lunged, but two guards caught him mid-run. He screamed curses, struggling like a wild animal. He's lying. He just wants his revenge. Jordan watched as Caleb was dragged out. The crowd, stunned, turned their attention back to the stage. Ethan looked at Jordan. Why didn't you come to me first? Jordan's reply was cold. I trusted you once. You didn't earn a second. Eidolon rebooted. Miles stood again, slightly shaken but unharmed. The suit, now cleared of the foreign override, moved gracefully once more. The audience rose to its feet in applause. Jordan turned back to the mic. This isn't just about a machine. It's about integrity, vision, and the people who refuse to let greed write history. Applause thundered through the room. Outside, the media scrambled for headlines. Inside, the room shifted, from doubt to awe. Jordan looked over to Elise. She smiled, mouthing, You did it. And for the first time in 10 years, he allowed himself a small smile back. But this wasn't the end.
No.
This was the beginning. Weeks passed, but the echoes of that day still rang through the halls of Echelon Dynamics and beyond. Headlines read, Jordan Wells returns, Eidolon reclaims the future. Sabotage foiled at Echelon Demo, insider arrested. From betrayal to breakthrough, the comeback of a genius. Ethan Rutherford had no choice but to publicly issue a statement. His once unquestioned authority had taken a hit. Investors demanded accountability. Though he wasn't directly involved in Caleb's betrayal, he was guilty of complacency, of letting ambition blind him to the corrosion inside his leadership circle. During a private board meeting, Ethan offered to step down as CEO. But the board had another idea. They reinstated Jordan as Chief Innovation Officer, granting him full control over the future direction of Eidolon X. Ethan remained in the company, but now in an advisory role, his pride bruised but his respect for Jordan quietly restored. As for Caleb, legal proceedings began swiftly. He was charged with cyber sabotage, theft of intellectual property, and attempted sale of defense-grade technology to unauthorized entities. The evidence was airtight, and the tech world watched as a once-respected name crumbled under the weight of his choices. Elise remained by Jordan's side throughout. Their bond had grown deeper, no longer just allies in innovation, but companions walking the same road. They often stayed late at the lab, working not just on Eidolon, but on the greater mission it represented. "Do you ever think," she asked him one night, as they watched Miles train with the exosuit, "how different things would be if they'd never pushed you out?" Jordan considered it. "If they hadn't betrayed me, I wouldn't have seen what I was really capable of. Pain forged my purpose. I used to think they destroyed me, but they made me sharper, wiser, and a hell of a lot more dangerous." He chuckled softly. "I'm glad you came back," she said. "I'm glad you stayed." Meanwhile, Eidolon X was entering full production. The first units were deployed to veteran rehabilitation centers across the U.S., followed by licensing deals with spinal injury clinics, construction firms, and even space agencies. Jordan ensured the technology remained accessible, refusing to allow the same greed that once exiled him to poison this future. Echelon stock soared, but more importantly, its reputation was reborn. For once, tech wasn't just about power or profit, it was about restoration. At the reopening ceremony for the Wells Innovation Center, named in his honor, Jordan stood with his hand on the shoulder of a young boy, no older than 10, who had lost the use of his legs in a car accident. The boy stood for the first time using Eidolon. The crowd cried. Jordan did too. But not everything was triumph and spotlight. One quiet morning, Jordan received a letter in a plain envelope. No return address. Inside was a simple note. "You didn't just prove us wrong. You reminded us who you are. It was Ethan. No apology. Just acknowledgement." And for Jordan, that was enough. He returned to the house his parents had left him, the only part of his old life that hadn't been taken. The place where the first sketches of Eidolon had been drawn on napkins and whiteboards late at night. He stood at the window, coffee in hand, looking out over the hills. He had rebuilt everything. But most importantly, he had rebuilt himself. He had faced betrayal and beat it with brilliance. He had answered injustice, not with vengeance, but with vision. Where others had burned bridges, he had built empires. Where others took shortcuts, he chose purpose. And now the world knew his name not as the man who was erased, but as the one who rewrote the future. As the sun rose, lighting up the valley below, Jordan whispered 3 simple words. "I'm still here." In the quiet of his rebuilt world, Jordan Wells sat in the same garage where it all began, now transformed into a clean, high-tech lab space. Not corporate. Not polished for press. Just wires, sketches, prototypes, and silence. He rolled out a small voice recorder, an old habit from his early days, and hit record. "To the next dreamer who's betrayed, abandoned, forgotten. You're not crazy. You're not weak. And you're definitely not done. The ones who left you behind may think they won. They didn't. Because here's the secret no one tells you. Rock bottom is solid ground. It's where your real foundation begins." He paused. Memories of the betrayal still surfaced occasionally, but now they didn't sting. They instructed. They reminded. If they doubt you, build anyway. If they mock you, focus anyway. If they try to steal your voice, speak louder with your work. You don't need revenge. You need results. And one day they will come back. Not with more lies. Not with more sabotage. But with regret. He clicked the recorder off and leaned back. The walls of the lab were now filled with photos, patients walking again, soldiers returning to training, and even a few astronauts in exo-assisted suits running field tests in low gravity. Jordan stared at one photo in particular, him and his old team back when trust was still easy. Back when betrayal was unthinkable. He didn't hate them anymore. He just understood now. Some people will only love you when you're useful. And some will only realize your value when you're gone. That was the lesson. And the twist? It was never about revenge. It was about rising higher, so high that the people who tried to bury you had no choice but to look up.